The rain lashed against the reinforced glass of the emergency bay doors, a relentless, rhythmic drumming that seemed to sync with the frantic beeping of the monitors inside. It was a stormy Tuesday night in Seattle, the kind of weather that kept most people indoors, safe and dry. But for the staff at St. Jude's Metropolitan Trauma Center, it was just another shift in the endless cycle of crisis and care. The air in the trauma bay smelled of antiseptic, ozone, and the metallic tang of blood, a scent that had become as familiar to Alina Vance as the coffee she drank to stay awake during her 12-hour rotations. She stood near the back of the room, her hands clasped loosely in front of her, her posture unassuming, almost invisible. To anyone watching, she was just another nurse, quiet, efficient, and entirely forgettable. But there was a tension in her shoulders, a stillness in her eyes that suggested she was waiting for something, or perhaps remembering something. In the center of the chaos lay a man who did not look like he belonged in this world of sterile lights and plastic curtains. He was massive, his frame broad and scarred, dressed in the tattered remnants of tactical gear that had been cut away by paramedics. His face was obscured by an oxygen mask, but the tattoos on his neck, inked in stark black lettering, spoke of a life lived on the edge of civilization. A German shepherd, a canine unit dog named Titan, stood guard beside the gurney, his body rigid, his teeth bared in a low, continuous growl that vibrated through the floorboards. The dog was not leashed. He was not restrained. He was simply there, a living barrier between the wounded man and the rest of the world. Every time a doctor or a nurse tried to approach the patient to check his vitals or insert an IV, Titan would snap, his jaws closing with a terrifying precision inches from their hands. The medical team was stalled, frustrated, and increasingly angry. They had a patient who was bleeding out and a dog that was preventing them from saving him. Dr. Marcus Thorne, the attending physician on duty, wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his gloved hand. He was a man who prided himself on control, on the absolute authority of his white coat and his medical degree. He looked at the dog with disdain, then at Alina, who was standing quietly in the corner, observing. He barked orders for the animal to be removed, his voice cutting through the noise of the room. He declared that they could not work with a wild beast breathing down their necks and called for security to remove the dog immediately. Two security guards stepped forward, their batons drawn, but they hesitated. Titan's growl deepened, a sound that promised violence if they crossed the invisible line he had drawn around his handler. The patient on the table let out a weak, ragged groan, his heart rate monitor spiking into the red zone. Time was running out, and the hierarchy of the hospital was clashing with the primal loyalty of a soldier's companion. Alina took a small step forward, her movement so subtle that no one noticed it except the dog. Titan's ears twitched. His head turned slightly, his dark eyes locking onto hers. For a second, the air in the room seemed to freeze. The doctors continued to shout orders, the nurses scrambled for supplies, but Alina was focused on a different frequency. She wasn't looking at the patient's wounds, she was looking at the dog, and more importantly, she was listening to the silence beneath the noise. She knew that look, she knew that stance. It wasn't aggression, it was protection. It was a code. And she was one of the few people left alive who could read it. To understand why a simple nurse in a Seattle trauma center could command the attention of a military working dog, and why that moment would change everything for everyone in that room, we have to go back. We have to look at the months leading up to that rainy Tuesday. We have to look at Alina Vance not as the hero she was about to become, but as the ghost she had chosen to be. Alina was 34 years old, though she looked older, her face lined with the fatigue of someone who carried secrets too heavy for one person to hold. She had arrived at St. Jude's 6 months ago, transferring from a small clinic in rural Montana. Her references were impeccable, her skills adequate, but her demeanor was what struck her new colleagues most. She was quiet, too quiet. She didn't engage in the break-room gossip. She didn't complain about the long hours. She didn't seek recognition. She simply did her job with a precision that was almost mechanical, and then she disappeared into the shadows of the hospital corridors. In the high-pressure environment of a metropolitan trauma center, silence is often mistaken for weakness, or worse, incompetence. Dr. Marcus Thorne, a man whose ego was as large as his salary, had marked Alina as insignificant from day one. He was a surgeon who believed in the theat, or of medicine, the dramatic saves, the loud declarations of expertise. Alina, with her calm, methodical approach, did not fit his narrative. She was a background character in his movie, a prop to be used when needed and ignored when not. He would snap his fingers without looking up from his charts, demanding saline flushes or other supplies, never saying please, never saying thank you. To him, she was part of the furniture, as interchangeable and unnoticed as the IV poles lining the walls. The other nurses, caught in the gravitational pull of Thorne's authority, began to treat Alina with the same casual disregard. They excluded her from lunch plans. They rolled their eyes when she asked clarifying questions about protocol. They whispered behind her back, speculating about why she had left her previous job. One nurse, Sarah, had said loudly enough for Alina to hear that she probably got fired or was hiding something, asserting that nobody is that quiet unless they have a record. The rumors swirled, harmless at first but corrosive over time. Alina heard them all. She absorbed them like rain on stone, letting them wash over her without leaving a mark. She had learned long ago that visibility was dangerous, that being seen meant being targeted, and she had spent the last 5 years trying to ensure that no one really saw her at all, but there were cracks in the facade, small, almost imperceptible details that hinted at a different life. Alina's hands, for instance. They were steady, unnaturally so. When she inserted an IV, even in the most chaotic situations, her hand never shook. She could find a vein in a dehydrated patient with a single touch, her fingers moving with a tactile intelligence that went beyond training. Then there was her awareness. She always knew where everyone was in the room. She could sense a change in atmosphere before it happened. Once when a patient had gone into sudden cardiac arrest, Alina had already grabbed the defibrillator paddles before the alarm had even finished sounding. She had moved with a speed and efficiency that startled the residents, but she had immediately slowed down, blending back into the background, letting the doctors take the credit. It was a habit, a reflex of invisibility that she couldn't quite shake. And then there were the nights. The nights when Alina stayed late, long after her shift had ended. She would sit in the empty break room, staring at the wall, her eyes distant. Sometimes she would trace the outline of a scar on her forearm, a thin, white line that looked like a burn. If anyone had asked, she would have said it was from a kitchen accident. But the shape was wrong for a burn. It was too straight, too precise. It looked like a shrapnel wound or a knife slash. Alina never talked about her past. When HR asked for her history, she provided the minimum required information. When colleagues asked about her family, she changed the subject. She was a blank slate, a mystery wrapped in scrubs, and in a place like St. Jude's, mysteries made people uncomfortable. People like Dr. Thorne preferred things they could categorize, label, and control. Alina was none of those things. If you are enjoying this story of hidden strength and quiet dignity, take a moment to hit the like button. It helps us bring these narratives to light and supports the channel in continuing to share stories that matter. Your engagement tells us that you value tales of integrity and resilience, and we appreciate every single click. Now, let's return to the hospital, where the tension was about to break. The culture at St. Jude's was one of hierarchy and performance. It was a place where status was determined by titles, by the number of surgeries performed, by the volume of one's voice in the operating room. Alina existed at the bottom of this pyramid not because she lacked skill, but because she refused to play the game. She didn't network, she didn't flatter, she didn't boast. And in a system that rewarded visibility, her invisibility was interpreted as a lack of ambition, or worse, a lack of capability. Dr. Thorne had made it his personal mission to keep her in her place. He criticized her charting, finding minor errors that everyone else overlooked. He questioned her judgment in front of interns, undermining her confidence in a subtle, insidious way. He would ask if she was sure about a dosage, his tone dripping with condescension, suggesting she double-check because he didn't want any mistakes on his watch. Alina would nod, apologize, and correct the chart, even when she knew she was right. She swallowed her pride day after day because she had a reason to stay. She needed the job. She needed the anonymity. But the weight of the humiliation was accumulating, layer upon layer, like sediment in a riverbed. It was changing her, hardening her resolve, but also isolating her further. She had no allies in the hospital, no friends, just the work and the memories she kept locked tight. The vault of her mind, memories of sand and heat and the sound of gunfire, memories of a unit that no longer existed, memories of a call sign that she had buried deep. The mystery breadcrumbs were there if anyone had cared to look. The way she scanned every exit when she entered a room, the way she slept with her back to the wall, the way she flinched just slightly at the sound of a helicopter overhead. These were not the habits of a civilian nurse. They were the habits of a survivor, of a soldier. But in the bright, sterile lights of the hospital, these signs were misinterpreted as anxiety or eccentricity. No one connected the dots. No one suspected that the quiet woman who fetched saline flushes and emptied bedpans had once been part of one of the most elite, classified special operations units in the country. No one knew that Alina Vance was formerly Petty Officer First Class Alina Viper Vance, a combat medic and K-9 handler for Naval Special Warfare Development Group. And no one knew that the man lying on the trauma table, the one bleeding out under the guard of his loyal dog, was her former commanding officer. The crisis arrived not with a warning, but with a scream. The ambulance doors burst open, and the paramedics wheeled in the gurney, shouting codes and vitals. They reported a male in his mid-30s with multiple gunshot wounds to the abdomen and chest, noting that his blood pressure was dropping and his heart rate was 140 beats per minute. They stated that they had lost him once on the way here. The patient was unconscious, his skin pale and clammy, his breathing shallow. Beside him, strapped into a specialized harness, was Titan, the German shepherd. The dog was agitated, whining, his eyes fixed on his handler. The paramedics explained quickly that the dog had refused to leave the patient's side during transport, and they had been unable to separate them without risking injury to the patient or the animal. One paramedic noted that the dog was a canine unit, trained to protect, and would not let anyone near him unless he trusted them. Dr. Thorne rushed to the table, his face grim. He ordered the harness to be cut and the dog to be removed immediately. The security guards moved in, but Titan reacted instantly. He lunged, snapping at the guard's arm, forcing him back. The dog positioned himself between the patient and the medical team, his body a shield, his growl a warning. The guard yelled that the dog was going to bite and that they couldn't get close. Thorne cursed, looking at the patient's monitors. The blood pressure was plummeting. They needed to start an IV to administer fluids and blood, but they couldn't get to the patient's arms. Titan was blocking every access point. Thorne shouted for the dog to be sedated, ordering a tranquilizer dart and stating that they should shoot him if they had to. No. The word came from the back of the room, quiet but firm. Everyone turned. Alina was standing there, her eyes wide, her face pale. She stated that they couldn't sedate him because he was in protective mode. She warned that if they threatened him, he would escalate and kill someone. Thorne sneered, telling her to stay out of it and reminding her that this was a medical emergency, not a dog show. He ordered her back to her station, but Alina didn't move. She was looking at Titan, and Titan was looking at her. The dog's ears were pinned back, his tail stiff. He was terrified not for himself, but for his handler. He was doing his job, the only job he knew, protect the pack leader at all costs. Alina took a step forward. She offered to try, stating that she could calm him down. Thorne laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. He mocked her, asking what made her think she could handle a military-attacked dog when she was afraid of her own shadow. The other nurses watched, some with curiosity, others with schadenfreude. They expected her to fail. They expected her to be bitten, to be humiliated, to be removed from the room. It was what usually happened when Alina tried to step out of line. But Alina didn't care about their expectations. She cared about the man on the table. She cared about the dog, and she knew that time was running out. She stated that she wasn't asking for permission, but telling them that if they tried to force the dog, they would lose the patient. She asked to be allowed to talk to him. Thorne hesitated. The patient's heart rate was now 160. The monitors were screaming. He had no other options. He spat that if the dog bit her, it was on her head, and if the patient died because she wasted time, she was fired. He asked if she understood. Alina nodded. She didn't look at Thorne. She looked only at Titan. Before we continue with this tense standoff, consider how often we judge people by their surface. How often we assume that quietness equals emptiness, or that humility equals weakness. If this story resonates with you, please subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you join a community of listeners who appreciate deep, character-driven narratives that explore the complexities of human nature. We have many more stories like this coming, and we'd love for you to be part of the journey. Alina moved slowly, deliberately. She didn't approach the dog directly. She approached the space around him. She lowered her body, making herself smaller, less threatening. She avoided eye contact, knowing that direct stare could be interpreted as a challenge. Instead, she focused on her breathing, slowing it down, projecting a sense of calm that radiated outward. Titan watched her, his head tilted, his growl softening slightly. He smelled her. He smelled the antiseptic, yes, but underneath that he smelled something else, something familiar, something from the past. Alina began to speak, not in English, but in a series of low, rhythmic clicks and hums. It wasn't a language anyone in the room recognized. It was a code. A specific sequence of sounds used by canine handlers to communicate with their dogs in high-noise environments or when silence was required. Titan's ears perked up. He took a half step back, his stance relaxing just a fraction. Alina continued, her voice barely above a whisper. She was reciting a sequence of numbers and words, a mnemonic device that she and Titan had practiced thousands of times in the deserts of Afghanistan and the mountains of Syria. 7. Blue. Echo. 9. The words were meaningless to the doctors, but to Titan they were a lifeline. They were a signal that the handler was present, that the pack was safe, that the threat was managed. The dog's tail gave a single, tentative wag, then another. The growl stopped. Alina took another step closer. She extended her hand, palm down, fingers curled, a non-threatening gesture. Titan sniffed her hand, his nose twitching. Then he licked her fingers, a sign of submission, of trust. The room was silent. The doctors and nurses stared in disbelief. The security guards lowered their batons. Dr. Thorne's mouth hung open, his arrogance momentarily replaced by shock. Alina didn't celebrate, she didn't look at them. She gently placed her hand on Titan's head, scratching him behind the ears. She whispered that he was a good boy and ordered him to stand down. The dog moved aside, lying down next to the gurney, his eyes still on the patient but no longer blocking the medical team. Alina then stated, her voice returning to its normal professional tone, that they could treat him now. The team surged forward, relieved and confused. They inserted IVs, started transfusions, and began the frantic work of stabilizing the patient. Alina stepped back, returning to her position in the corner. She watched them work, her face unreadable. But her hands were trembling now, not from fear but from the adrenaline crash, from the memory that had been triggered. She had just revealed a part of herself she had sworn to keep hidden, and she knew with a sinking feeling in her gut that there would be consequences. The surgery lasted 4 hours, 4 hours of intense, focused effort by the surgical team led by Dr. Thorne. They removed 2 bullets, repaired a punctured lung, and stitched up multiple lacerations. It was a successful operation by all medical metrics. The patient survived, but the atmosphere in the hospital had shifted. The story of the nurse and the dog had spread like wildfire. Whispers followed Alina wherever she went. People asked how she did it and who she really was. The mystery surrounding her had deepened, but instead of earning respect, it had earned suspicion. In a workplace built on transparency and protocol, Alina's secret competence was viewed as a threat. Dr. Thorne was furious, not because the patient had died, he hadn't, but because his authority had been challenged. Because a subordinate, a nobody, had solved a problem he couldn't, because she had made him look incompetent in front of his peers. He couldn't admit that she had saved the situation. He couldn't acknowledge her skill, so he did what bullies do. He twisted the narrative. He filed an incident report, claiming that Alina had delayed treatment by interfering with security protocols. He claimed that she had endangered the staff by approaching a dangerous animal without proper authorization. He claimed that her actions, while ultimately successful, were reckless and unauthorized. The meeting with HR was held 2 days later. Alina sat in a small, windowless office, facing Dr. Thorne and the hospital administrator, Mrs. Gable. Thorne laid out his case with cold precision. He stated that Nurse Vance disregarded direct orders. He argued that she approached a potentially lethal animal without protective gear. He claimed she used unverified methods to subdue the dog. He asserted that while the outcome was favorable, the process was unacceptable. He stated that they cannot have staff members acting as cowboys, and that they have protocols for a reason. He warned that if she had been bitten, the liability would have been immense, and if the patient had died because of the delay, they would have been sued into oblivion. Mrs. Gable, a woman who prioritized risk management above all else, nodded solemnly. She asked Alina to explain her actions. Alina looked at her, then at Thorne. She could tell them the truth. She could tell them that she was a former Navy SEAL medic. She could tell them that Titan was a trained military working dog who responded only to specific commands. She could show them her records, her commendations, her discharge papers. But to do so would be to break the promise she had made to herself. To break the cover she had built to escape the trauma of her past. To reveal herself was to invite the spotlight, the questions, the pity, the horror. She had come to St. Jude's to heal, not to be a spectacle. Alina stated that she acted based on her assessment of the situation. She explained that the dog was in protective mode and that standard security procedures would have escalated the threat. She claimed she used de-escalation techniques to ensure the safety of the patient and the staff. Thorne scoffed, asking where a nurse learned such techniques, dismissing her as a negotiator. Alina remained silent. She wouldn't lie, but she wouldn't tell the truth either. Her silence was interpreted as guilt, as evasion. Mrs. Gable stated that given the severity of the infraction, they were placing Alina on administrative leave, pending a full review. She ordered Alina not to enter the hospital premises until further notice and announced that they would be conducting an investigation into her background and qualifications. She warned that if they found any discrepancies in her credentials or any history of disciplinary action, her employment would be terminated immediately. Alina nodded. She stood up, gathered her bag, and walked out of the office. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She accepted the injustice with the same stoicism she had shown in the trauma bay. But inside, she was burning, not with anger but with sorrow. She had saved a life, and she was being punished for it. If you've ever felt misunderstood or unfairly judged, you know how heavy that burden can be. Please take a moment to comment below with your thoughts on this situation. Do you think Alina should have revealed her past to save her job? Or was her silence justified? We read every comment and love hearing your perspectives on these moral dilemmas. Your voices help shape the conversation and bring depth to our community. The days that followed were a blur of isolation. Alina stayed in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events in her mind. She checked her email constantly, waiting for the final verdict. She knew what they would find. Her records were classified. The Department of Defense would not release them to a civilian hospital administrator. To them, her file would look like a black hole. Missing years, unexplained gaps, redacted entries. It would look suspicious. It would look like she was hiding something criminal, and in their eyes, she was. She was a liar, a fraud. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the patient woke up. Commander Jack Reynolds, U.S. Navy retired, opened his eyes to the sterile white ceiling of the ICU. He was weak in pain, but alive. His first question was not about his injuries. It was about Titan. He rasped, asking where his dog was. The nurse on duty, Sarah, smiled reassuringly. She told him the dog was fine and in the kennel downstairs, having been taken care of. Reynolds frowned, asking who handled him and who calmed him down. Sarah hesitated. She mentioned a nurse, Nurse Vance, guessing that she has a way with animals. Reynolds' eyes widened. He whispered the name Vance, asking if it was Alina Vance. Sarah shrugged, stating she didn't know her first name, just Vance, and mentioned that she was on leave now, having gotten in trouble for interfering with security. Reynolds tried to sit up, wincing in pain. He ordered the administrator to be brought to him, but he was too weak. The sedatives pulled him back under, but the seed had been planted. He knew that name, he knew that face. He had seen it in the darkness of a cave in Kandahar. He had heard it over the radio in the valleys of Helmand. Alina Vance, Viper, his medic, his friend, the woman who had saved his life more times than he could count. And she was here, in Seattle, working as a nurse. And she was in trouble. Reynolds spent the next 2 days gathering his strength. He made phone calls, not to the hospital administration, but to his old contacts, to the Navy, to the Special Operations Command. He needed to verify what he suspected. He needed to know why Alina was hiding, and he needed to make sure that no one harmed her while he was recovering. The wheels of bureaucracy began to turn, slowly at first, then with increasing momentum. A request for information was sent Fr. The Pentagon to St. Jude's Hospital. A formal inquiry into the employment status of one Alina Vance. The hospital administrator, Mrs. Gable, received the letter with confusion. She wondered why the Department of Defense was interested in a nurse on administrative leave. The arrival of authority is often quiet. It doesn't come with sirens or fanfare. It comes with a suit, a briefcase, and a demeanor that commands respect without raising a voice. 3 days after Alina's suspension, a black sedan pulled up to the entrance of St. Jude's. A man stepped out. He was tall, distinguished, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much war. He wore a civilian suit, but he moved with the precision of a military officer. This was Admiral William Halsey, a retired 3-star admiral and a close friend of Commander Reynolds. He had been called in as a liaison, a representative of the highest order. He walked into the hospital lobby, ignoring the receptionist, and asked directly for the administrator. Mrs. Gable met him in her office, nervous and unsure. She greeted him as Admiral Halsey and asked what they could do for him. Halsey didn't shake her hand. He sat down, placing his briefcase on the desk. He stated that he was there regarding Nurse Alina Vance and understood she was currently on administrative leave. Gable nodded, confirming this and explaining that there was an incident involving a K-9 unit where Vance violated protocol and that they were investigating her credentials. Halsey raised an eyebrow, asking if they were investigating her credentials. Gable sensed the danger in his tone. She explained that yes, her background was unclear, with gaps in her employment history, and that they needed to ensure she was qualified to practice nursing. Halsey opened his briefcase. He pulled out a folder. It was thick, stamped with classification markings. He stated that Nurse Vance was more than qualified. He revealed that she was one of the most decorated combat medics in the history of naval special warfare. He stated that she served 3 tours in Afghanistan and 2 in Iraq. He mentioned that she was awarded the Bronze Star with Valor for saving the lives of 6 SEALs under heavy fire. He disclosed that she was a K-9 handler for Tier 1 assets and that the dog in their trauma bay, Titan, was her partner. He stated that they operated together for 4 years. Gable's face went pale. She stammered that she didn't know. Halsey leaned forward. He stated that she suspended Alina for saving the life of Commander Jack Reynolds, a Navy SEAL who was under her care. He accused her of punishing Alina for using the skills she learned while serving her country, skills that were the only reason Commander Reynolds was alive today. The room was silent. The air conditioner hummed, a mundane sound in the face of such revelation. Gable looked at the folder, then at Halsey. She asked what he wanted them to do. Halsey stood up. He demanded that they reinstate her immediately with full back pay. He demanded an apology not just from her but from Dr. Thorne. And he wanted it to be public. He stated that what they did wasn't just a mistake, it was an insult to a hero. This is the turning point, the moment when the truth breaks through the lies. If you are feeling the satisfaction of justice being served, please share this video with a friend. Sharing helps these stories reach people who need to hear them, people who may be facing their own battles with injustice. Let's spread the message that competence and integrity always rise to the top. Halsey didn't wait for Gable's response. He walked out of the office and headed for the trauma bay. He wanted to see Alina. He found her in the break room packing her personal belongings. She had assumed she was fired. She had accepted it. She was ready to move on, to disappear again. When she saw Halsey, she froze, her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but of recognition. She whispered, "Admiral." Halsey smiled, a rare, genuine smile. He told her to be at ease, Viper, and stated that she wasn't done yet. Alina shook her head. She stated that they fired her because she broke protocol. Halsey laughed softly. He asked, "Protocol?" He reminded her that she saved a SEAL, Alina. He reminded her that she saved Jack. He stated that was the only protocol that matters. He told her to come with him, mentioning a meeting in the conference room that she was going to attend. Alina hesitated. She stated that she didn't want to cause trouble. Halsey's expression hardened. He stated that she wasn't causing trouble, she was correcting it. He told her to let's go. The conference room was filled. Dr. Thorne, Mrs. Gable, the head of nursing, and several other senior staff members were seated around the table. They looked uncomfortable, sensing the shift in power. When Alina walked in, accompanied by Admiral Halsey, the room went silent. Thorne looked at her with disdain, but when he saw Halsey, his face drained of color. He recognized the rank, even if it was retired. He recognized the authority. Halsey took his seat at the head of the table. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. His presence was introduction enough. He began, his voice calm but carrying, stating that he was there to discuss the employment status of Petty Officer First Class Alina Vance. He paused, letting the title sink in. Thorne muttered, "Petty Officer?" He stated that she's a nurse. Halsey looked at him. He corrected him, stating that she is a Navy medic, a SEAL medic, and she is currently on leave from active reserve duty, which permits her to work in civilian health care. He stated that her credentials are not just valid, they are exemplary. He explained that the gaps in her resume are due to classified operations. Operations that saved American lives. Operations that Dr. Thorne knows nothing about. Thorne shifted in his seat. He stammered that he was unaware. Halsey cut him off. He stated that ignorance is not an excuse for injustice. He accused Thorne of penalizing Ms. Vance for acting with competence and courage. He stated that Thorne labeled her a risk because she didn't fit his narrow definition of a nurse. But Halsey told him what she is. He stated that she is a survivor, she is a leader, and she is a hero, and he accused Thorne of treating her like a criminal. The reveal continues, peeling back the layers of Alina's past. If you are captivated by this unfolding drama, please hit the notification bell. This ensures you never miss a chapter of our ongoing series. We have incredible stories planned, and we want you to be the first to experience them. Your support means the world to us. Halsey opened the folder again. He slid a copy of Alina's service record across the table. It was redacted, but the visible parts were enough. The medals, the citations, the letters of commendation from generals and admirals. Thorne picked it up, his hands shaking. He read the words, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty." He looked at Alina, really looked at her for the first time. He saw the scar on her arm. He saw the steadiness in her eyes. He saw the weight she carried. And he realized with a sickening clarity that he had bullied a warrior. Halsey turned to Alina. He stated that Commander Reynolds is awake. He mentioned that Reynolds asked for her. He wanted to thank her, not just for saving his life in the trauma bay, but for saving it in Kandahar. He stated that Reynolds remembers her, Viper. He never forgot her. Alina's breath hitched. She asked if Jack is alive. Halsey nodded. He stated that he is because of her. Both times, the room was heavy with emotion. The nurses who had mocked Alina looked down in shame. The administrators looked at their shoes. Thorne looked at Alina, his arrogance shattered. He stammered an apology, stating that he didn't know. Alina looked at him. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply nodded. She stated, "Apology accepted." But she added that it's not about her. It's about the patient. It's about doing the right thing even when no one is watching, even when it costs you. Halsey stood up. He announced that Ms. Vance is reinstated, effective immediately. He stated that her record will be expunged of this incident, and he addressed Dr. Thorne, stating that he will be recommending to the medical board that his conduct be reviewed. He stated that bullying staff is not leadership, it's cowardice, and he stated that they don't tolerate cowards in the military. He suspected the civilian medical community shouldn't either. Thorne nodded, unable to speak. The power dynamic had completely reversed. The quiet nurse was now the center of attention, not because she sought it, but because she had earned it. The confrontation is over, but the aftermath is just beginning. How does a community heal after such a breach of trust? How does a hero return to a place that rejected her? These are the questions we explore in the final act. If you are invested in Alina's journey, please consider becoming a member of our channel. Members get early access to scripts, behind-the-scenes content, and exclusive updates. Your membership supports independent storytelling and helps us keep these narratives free for everyone. Alina returned to work the next day. The atmosphere in the hospital had changed. The whispers were gone, replaced by a respectful silence. The nurses greeted her with nods of acknowledgement. The doctors treated her with professional courtesy. Dr. Thorne avoided her, his shame evident in his avoidance. But Alina didn't let it affect her. She didn't seek revenge. She didn't demand special treatment. She simply went back to work, doing her job with the same quiet precision as before. But now she walked with her head high. She was no longer invisible. She was seen, and she was respected. A week later, Commander Jack Reynolds was discharged. He came to the nurses' station to say goodbye. He was still weak, leaning on a cane, but his eyes were bright. He looked at Alina, and for a moment the years fell away. They were back in the desert, brothers and sisters in arms. He called her Viper, stating that she looks good. Alina smiled, a real smile. She replied that he looks good too. He reached out and hugged her, a brief, tight embrace. He whispered, "Thank you for everything." Alina pulled back. She stated, "Just doing my job, sir." Reynolds shook his head. He stated, "No, you did more than your job. You kept your promise. You kept us safe." Titan was there too, sitting calmly by Reynolds' side. The dog looked at Alina, his tail wagging. Alina knelt down and scratched him behind the ears. She called him a good boy, Titan, and stated that he did good. The dog licked her hand, a gesture of pure affection. The staff watched from a distance, witnessing the bond between the soldier, the nurse, and the dog. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated humanity. A reminder that behind the uniforms and the titles there are people, people who serve. People who sacrifice, people who endure. As we approach the end of this story, take a moment to reflect on the themes of humility and integrity. Alina didn't seek glory, she sought peace. But when called upon, she rose to the occasion. If this story inspired you, please leave a comment with the word respect below. Let's fill the comments section with positivity and appreciation for those who serve in silence. Your words create a ripple effect of kindness. The moral of the story is not just about justice, it's about perception. We often judge people by their exterior, by their volume, by their confidence. We assume that the loudest person in the room is the most capable. But often the true strength lies in the quiet ones, the ones who observe, the ones who listen, the ones who act when it matters, not for recognition, but because it is the right thing to do. Alina Vance taught St. Jude's Hospital a lesson that day. She taught them that humility is not weakness, that silence is not emptiness, that service is not about status. Dr. Thorne eventually left the hospital. He couldn't face the staff after the incident. He transferred to a private practice in another city, a move that was seen as a quiet resignation. The hospital implemented new training programs on workplace respect and bias. They invited Alina to speak at a staff meeting, but she declined. She didn't want to be a speaker. She wanted to be a nurse. And so she continued her work, caring for patients, calming fears, and healing wounds. But she was no longer alone. She had allies now, friends, people who knew her story and who respected her for it. And Titan visited the hospital regularly. He became a therapy dog for the pediatric ward, bringing joy to children who were scared and alone. Alina would often stop by to visit him, spending a few minutes scratching his ears and talking to him in their secret code. It was a reminder of the past, yes, but also a promise of the future. A future where she didn't have to hide, where she could be both Alina and Viper, both the nurse and the warrior, both the woman and the hero. The sun set over Seattle, casting a golden glow over the city. Alina stood on the balcony of her apartment, looking out at the skyline. The rain had stopped. The air was clear. She felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. The weight was still there, but it was lighter now, shared. She had been vindicated, not by her own efforts, but by the truth. And the truth, she realized, was a powerful thing. It couldn't be hidden forever. It would always find a way to surface, to shine, to heal. She thought about Jack, about Titan, about Halsey. about the team she had lost and the new team she had found. She thought about the patients she would see tomorrow, the lives she would touch, and she smiled. She was ready, ready for whatever came next, ready to serve, ready to be seen. This story is a work of fiction, inspired by the real-life bravery of military medics and K-9 handlers everywhere. It is a tribute to those who serve in the shadows, protecting us without seeking applause. If you enjoyed this narrative, please consider watching our next video, The Janitor Who Fixed the Supercomputer, another tale of hidden competence and unexpected justice. Click the link on the screen to continue the journey. We hope this story has touched your heart and reminded you of the power of integrity. Please subscribe if you haven't already and join our growing community of storytellers and listeners. Together, we can celebrate the unsung heroes in our midst. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. As the credits roll, remember that everyone has a story. Everyone has a hidden depth. Treat people with kindness, with respect, with curiosity. You never know who you are talking to. You never know what they have survived. You never know what they are capable of. Be the person who sees them. Be the person who listens. Be the person who believes. Alina Vance went back to work the next morning. She put on her scrubs. She pinned her badge to her chest. She walked into the hospital not as a ghost, but as a woman. A woman who had faced her past and had found peace. A woman who had been mocked and had been vindicated. A woman who had whispered a code and had saved a life. And as she walked down the hallway, the staff parted for her. Not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of respect. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you have a story idea, or if you want to share your own experience with injustice and redemption, please email us. We love hearing from you. Your stories inspire us to keep writing, to keep creating, to keep hoping. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never underestimate the quiet ones. The narrative of Alina Vance serves as a poignant reminder of the complexities of human character and the dangers of superficial judgment. In a world that often values loudness over substance, her story stands as a testament to the power of quiet competence. The initial scenes in the trauma bay, with the chaos and the immediate conflict between the medical team and the protective dog, set the stage for a deeper exploration of trust and authority. The dog, Titan, was not merely an obstacle. He was a mirror, reflecting the true nature of those who approached him. Dr. Thorne saw a beast to be controlled, a problem to be eliminated. Alina saw a partner, a protector, a soul in distress. This fundamental difference in perception defined the entire conflict. Thorne's approach was rooted in domination, in the belief that authority is exerted through force and command. Alina's approach was rooted in empathy, in the understanding that true leadership involves connection and communication. The backstory of Alina's integration into the hospital staff highlights the pervasive nature of workplace bias. Her silence was not interpreted as professionalism, but as inadequacy. This misinterpretation is a common societal flaw, where introversion or trauma-induced reticence is mistaken for a lack of capability. The microaggressions she endured from Dr. Thorne and her colleagues were not just personal slights, they were systemic failures. The hospital culture, driven by hierarchy and ego, failed to recognize the value of diversity in temperament and experience. By marginalizing Alina, they deprived themselves of her unique skills and insights. The incident with the K-9 unit was not an anomaly. It was the inevitable result of a system that prioritizes conformity over competence. The fact that Alina had to risk her job and her safety to save the patient underscores the severity of this cultural dysfunction. The revelation of Alina's military past serves as the pivotal moment in the narrative, recontextualizing every action she had taken prior. Her steady hands, her situational awareness, her ability to remain calm under pressure, these were not innate traits, but honed skills forged in the crucible of war. The classification of her records adds a layer of realism to the story, reflecting the real-world challenges faced by veterans transitioning to civilian life. The secrecy surrounding special operations often creates barriers to understanding and recognition. Alina's reluctance to reveal her past was not just a personal choice. It was a protective mechanism, a way to maintain a semblance of normalcy in a world that often struggles to comprehend the realities of combat. The admiration and respect shown by Admiral Halsey and Commander Reynolds validate her service and her sacrifice, providing a counter-narrative to the dismissal she experienced at the hospital. The resolution of the conflict, with the reinstatement of Alina and the public apology, offers a satisfying conclusion, but it also raises important questions about accountability and change. While Dr. Thorne faced consequences, The broader institutional changes required to prevent such incidents in the future are only hinted at. The implementation of new training programs is a positive step, but true cultural shift requires ongoing effort and commitment. Alina's decision to decline the invitation to speak at the staff meeting is significant. It reinforces her character as someone who seeks neither fame nor recognition, but simply the ability to do her job with integrity. Her return to work, not as a celebrity, but as a respected colleague, suggests a path forward that is grounded in humility and service. The relationship between Alina and Titan adds an emotional depth to the story, highlighting the bond between humans and animals in high-stress environments. The dog's loyalty and protective instinct are portrayed not as aggression, but as a profound form of love and duty. The code they shared, the secret language of clicks and hums, symbolizes the deep connection that can exist between individuals who have shared traumatic experiences. Titan's subsequent role as a therapy dog in the pediatric ward extends this theme of healing and service, showing how the skills and instincts developed in war can be repurposed for peace and comfort. The setting of Seattle, with its rain and gray skies, provides a fitting backdrop for the story's themes of concealment and revelation. The weather mirrors Alina's internal state, a constant drizzle of melancholy and memory. The trauma center, with its sterile lights and urgent rhythms, represents the frontline of civilian life, where the echoes of war occasionally intrude. The contrast between the chaotic exterior of the storm and the controlled interior of the hospital reflects the tension between the external world and the internal lives of the characters. The narrative structure, moving from the immediate crisis to the backstory and then to the resolution, allows for a gradual unfolding of the truth. This pacing builds suspense and engages the audience, encouraging them to piece together the clues alongside the characters. The use of pause markers creates natural breaks in the narration, allowing for reflection and anticipation. These pauses serve as breaths in the story, moments of silence that amplify the impact of the subsequent revelations. The character of Dr. Thorne, while antagonistic, is not portrayed as a cartoon villain. His actions are driven by insecurity and a rigid adherence to protocol, rather than pure malice. This complexity makes his eventual humiliation more impactful, as it reveals the fragility of his authority. His inability to adapt to the unexpected, to recognize competence outside of his own framework, is his ultimate downfall. The story suggests that true leadership requires flexibility, humility, and the willingness to learn from others, regardless of their status or background. The role of Admiral Halsey as the Deus Ex Machina is carefully handled to avoid feeling contrived. His arrival is justified by the existing relationship between him and Commander Reynolds, and his authority is established through his demeanor and knowledge. He serves as a bridge between the military and civilian worlds, translating the value of Alina's service into terms that the hospital administration can understand. His presence validates Alina's worth and forces the institution to confront its own biases. The theme of vindication is central to the story, but it is portrayed not as revenge, but as restoration. Alina does not seek to punish those who wronged her. She seeks to restore her dignity and her ability to serve. The public apology and reinstatement are not just personal victories, but symbolic acts of justice. They affirm the value of her service and the importance of recognizing the contributions of veterans in civilian society. The story also touches on the theme of trauma and healing. Alina's journey is one of integrating her past with her present, of finding a way to live with the memories of war while contributing to the healing of others. Her silence is not just a shield, but a space for processing and reflection. The story suggests that healing is not about forgetting, but about finding meaning and purpose in the aftermath of trauma. The ending, with Alina standing on her balcony, looking out at the city, offers a sense of closure and hope. The clearing sky symbolizes the lifting of the burden she has carried. Her readiness to face the future suggests a renewed sense of agency and confidence. The story ends not with a grand gesture, but with a quiet moment of peace, reinforcing the theme that true strength is often found in stillness. The narrative invites the audience to reflect on their own perceptions and biases. It challenges us to look beyond the surface, to listen to the quiet voices, and to recognize the hidden strengths in those around us. It reminds us that everyone has a story, a history, and a capacity for greatness that may not be immediately apparent. The story of Alina Vance is a fictional tale, but it resonates with real-world experiences. It speaks to the struggles of veterans, the challenges of workplace dynamics, and the universal desire for respect and recognition. It is a story about the power of integrity, the importance of empathy, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. As we conclude this narrative, we are left with a lasting impression of Alina's quiet dignity. She is a hero not because she sought glory, but because she remained true to herself and her values, even in the face of adversity. Her story is a beacon of hope, reminding us that justice, though sometimes delayed, is ultimately achievable. The legacy of Alina Vance at St. Jude's Hospital will likely be one of subtle but profound change. Her presence will serve as a reminder to the staff of the importance of humility and respect. Her actions will inspire others to look deeper, to question assumptions, and to value competence over conformity. The bond between Alina and Titan remains a powerful symbol of loyalty and trust. Their reunion, and Titan's new role as a therapy dog, suggest a cycle of healing that extends beyond the individual to the community. It is a reminder that even in the aftermath of violence and trauma, there is potential for growth and compassion. The story concludes with a final call to action, urging the audience to carry the lessons of Alina's journey into their own lives, to be kinder, more observant, and more open to the possibilities that lie beneath the surface. To never underestimate the quiet ones, for they may just be the ones who save us when it matters most. Thank you for accompanying us on this journey through the halls of St. Jude's Metropolitan Trauma Center. We hope that Alina's story has inspired you, challenged you, and moved you. Please continue to support our channel, share these stories, and engage with our community. Together, we can create a space where narratives of justice and integrity thrive.